The blizzard's fury trapped Jonas McCade high in the frozen peaks with no hope of a warm fire. His horse stumbled through towering drifts, and the howling wind drowned every whispered prayer he offered. Then he saw a strange silhouette huddled against a dead pine, barely visible in the whiteout. It was a young woman, her lips blue, clutching a small wooden loom to her chest tightly. She wore only a thin shawl, and her bare feet were wrapped in bloody strips of cloth. Jonas dismounted and wrapped her in his heavy coat, but she did not speak a single word. Her eyes, dark as river stone, stared through him as if seeing a ghost behind his shoulder. He lifted her onto the saddle and trudged toward his remote cabin through the screaming wind. By the hearth, he rubbed warmth into her frozen hands, noticing her fingers were calloused from weaving. She still held the loom, and a pouch of silver threads hung from her ragged belt. He offered her broth and a blanket, but she simply stared at the flames, mute and trembling. That night, she began to weave, her shuttle flying across the warp with an eerie precision. Jonas watched, mesmerized, as a pattern emerged under the firelight, silver threads shimmering like captured moonlight. He could not interpret the shapes yet, but a cold dread settled deep inside his bones. She wove through the night, and by dawn, a scene had formed, a valley with a dark stream. He recognized the valley immediately. It was his own ranch, passed down through 4 proud generations. But the tapestry showed the stream running red, and a black horse trampling a native encampment. Jonas frowned, pulling out an old daguerreotype of his great-grandfather, the founder of the McCade spread. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same black horse, the same hat, the same cruel set of jaw. His great-grandfather had been painted as a pioneer hero, but the loom told a different story. He asked the woman what this meant, but she only touched her lips, then her silent heart. She could not speak, yet her fingers flew faster, adding more details to the damning silver scene. The tapestry showed his ancestor setting fire to a family's tipi, women and children fleeing in terror. A sacred bundle was stolen, and a small girl with dark eyes watched from the reeds. The woven girl's eyes were identical to those of the mute weaver sitting before his fire. Jonas's hand shook as he traced the threads, realizing the massacre had happened on his land. The woman, whose name he had not yet learned, pointed to her chest and then the child. She was a descendant, the last of the bloodline his great-grandfather had tried to exterminate. The loom was her testimony, a silent accusation stitched across generations to finally reach his hearth. Jonas felt the weight of his heritage crumble into ash inside his thundering and guilty heart. He had always been told his land was earned by grit, not stolen by murder and flame. But the tapestry did not lie, and the mute weaver's eyes held no malice, only sorrow. He asked through a choked voice if she had come to seek vengeance for her slaughtered ancestors. She shook her head slowly, then wove a new image, 2 hands clasped above the black stream. She had come not for revenge, but for acknowledgement, for the truth buried under the pasture grass. Jonas wept, burying his face in his hands, the tears soaking the wooden floor of his cabin. The fire crackled, and the wind outside seemed to carry the wails of the long-dead innocent souls. When he looked up, the weaver was holding his great-grandfather's old deed, yellowed and crumbling. She had found it in a chest, and now she placed it gently into his trembling palm. She gestured that the paper was stained not with ink, but with the blood of her family. He understood then that the land could never truly belong to him until justice was woven anew. He stood, strode to the hearth, and threw the old deed into the hungry flames. The paper curled and blackened, and the weaver's eyes widened in a profound and quiet shock. He said the land would be returned to her line, that she could claim it freely. But she picked up the shuttle and began to weave again, creating a new pattern entirely. She showed 2 figures standing side by side, planting a sapling beside a freshly dug grave. The grave was for the past, and the sapling was a future where both bloodlines shared peace. Jonas understood that she did not want to banish him, but to build something new together. He knelt and vowed to honor her ancestors with a monument of stone and eternal truth. Over the following weeks, they worked together, building a shrine where the old massacre occurred. She wove a banner that told the true story, and he hung it in the town church. The townsfolk were shocked, but the mute weaver's silent testimony could not be denied or dismissed. Some cursed at him for betraying his forefathers, but others saw the courage in confronting the past. Jonas gave her the legal deed to the valley, and she accepted it with a gentle nod. But she immediately signed it back over to a trust that would preserve it for all. Together, they became guardians of the land, protecting it from greed and ever forgetting the truth. The silver tapestry remained on display, a shimmering indictment and a promise of enduring reconciliation. Jonas learned to understand her gestures, and she learned to read his silent expressions of care. Their bond grew deeper than any romantic love. It was a covenant forged in historical fire. One evening, she finally broke her silence, whispering his name with a voice like autumn wind. He wept again, for her first spoken word in decades was a gift of profound trust. She said the spirits of her ancestors had released their anger and could now rest peacefully. They stood on the ridge, watching wild horses gallop through the valley their ancestors had fought over. He touched her shoulder, and she leaned into him, the silver threads of her pouch glinting. They knew the past could not be changed, but the future could be woven differently. The sapling grew into a mighty oak, its roots intertwining with the bones of the fallen. Jonas carved their names into the stone monument, marking the end of a century-old feud. Her voice returned slowly, and she began to tell stories of her people by the fire. Jonas wrote them down in a leather-bound journal, preserving the oral history that almost vanished. They taught the town's children to respect the land and the spirits who dwelled there. The McCade name, once a symbol of theft, became synonymous with restitution and profound healing. When Jonas grew old and his hair turned to silver like her threads, he had no regrets. He had given away his inheritance, but he had gained a soul untethered from inherited guilt. On the last day of his life, she placed the tapestry over his bed as a shroud. He smiled, his weathered hand holding hers, and said the land was finally clean. She replied that his heart had always been clean, only his bloodline had been stained. He passed peacefully, and she wove one final thread into the tapestry, a golden sunrise. The valley thrived under her stewardship, and the silver-threaded loom was passed to a museum. Travelers came from far away to hear the tale of the rancher and the mute weaver. They learned that true legacy is not what you inherit, but what you have the courage to unravel. She lived many more years, her voice carrying the songs of her resurrected ancestors to the wind. When she joined Jonas in the beyond, the whole valley mourned for a full week. They were buried side by side under the oak, their graves marked by a single loomstone. The silver tapestry was preserved in a glass case, still shimmering as if freshly woven that day. Some say at night, the figures in the tapestry move, dancing in a circle of peace. The dark stream now runs clear, and the tipi of the past stands only in memory. So ends the legend of how a saved mute weaver exposed a family's forgotten dark secret. She gave him the painful, shimmering clarity that only the truth can ever truly provide. Thank you for witnessing this story of ancestral redemption from West Old Stories. Dear viewer, if you believe in weaving truth from lies, subscribe to West Old Stories and like this video. Tell us in the comments what family secret you would have the courage to confront today.